April 8, 1943. 27,000 feet above Caen, France. Oberleutnant Ralph Hermican, a veteran ace of Jageschwader 26, surveyed the scene from the cockpit of his Focke-Wulf 190A5. His oxygen mask could not conceal the distinct air superiority as he watched the ungainly silhouettes struggling laboriously toward his high-altitude formation through the crystalline canopy. Hermican, studying the American fighters making their combat debut over occupied Europe, transmitted his assessment to his wingman. "The enemy has sent us flying milk bottles," he announced, unable to suppress his laughter at the sight of the massive Republic P-47 Thunderbolts straining against gravity. Below them, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group commenced their labored ascent in tight formation. Their 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double Wasp engines roared, fighting the immense 7-ton weight of the aircraft. To German pilots, who were accustomed to the sleek profiles of Spitfires and the nimble Soviet fighters, these corpulent American machines appeared almost comical. Barrel-shaped fuselages topped with vast greenhouse canopies, wings that seemed too small for their massive bodies, and propellers that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe inventory. What Hermican did not know, what none of the German pilots circling like predatory wolves above could have possibly imagined, was that they were witnessing the arrival of the weapon destined to systematically destroy the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles would transform from object of derision into instruments of terror. The mathematics of destruction were already loaded into those broad wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition for 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns, creating a combined rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute. Enough concentrated firepower to sever a Messerschmitt in half in less than 2 seconds. The transformation began that April morning when Major Donald Blakesley, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron, spotted the German formation positioning for attack. The former Eagle Squadron veteran, who had transferred from flying RAF Spitfires just weeks earlier, understood a crucial truth his men had yet to grasp. Survival in the P-47 required abandoning everything they thought they knew about air combat. The Thunderbolt represented a radical departure from conventional fighter design philosophy. While the Germans had pursued lightweight interceptors optimized for climb and turn performance, Republic Aviation had created an unprecedented high-altitude juggernaut, a machine designed to use sheer mass, raw power, and overwhelming firepower to redefine the rules of aerial warfare. Among the 56 American pilots spread across the French sky, that morning were men who would become legends, future aces whose names would strike fear into Luftwaffe hearts. But on April 8, 1943, they were novices in an untested machine, facing the most experienced fighter force in the world. While Allied nations have been fighting continuously since 1939, with seasoned veterans of Poland, France, Britain, and Russia already hardened by years of brutal conflict, the Americans have been in combat for exactly 0 days. This narrative is fundamentally about the victory of industrial logic over tactical brilliance. It recounts how the seamless merger of quantity and quality forged an overwhelming superiority, and how the initial laughter German pilots ultimately curdled into terror as they discovered precisely what synchronized Browning machine guns, firing an avalanche of high-velocity steel, could do to an enemy aircraft at 400 yards. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, the embodiment of this industrial might, had been born from the sheer panic that gripped Allied military planners in June 1940. As Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulf swept across the collapsing skies of France, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, received urgent and highly specific requirements from the U.S. Army Air Corps. They demanded an interceptor capable of operating at extreme high altitude, one that could decisively match the best performance the Luftwaffe had to offer. What Kartveli designed instead was a metal monster that completely redefined the limits of what a fighter plane could be. It will be a dinosaur, Kartveli confessed to his design team, but it will be a dinosaur with good proportions. The XP-47B prototype, which first flew on May 6, 1941, shocked every observer. Weighing 9,900 pounds empty, it was a staggering 65% heavier than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. The aircraft's massive turbo-supercharger system, with its complex ducting running relentlessly through the entire length of the rear fuselage, gave the machine an almost corpulent, pregnant appearance. Test pilots approaching Behemoth for the first time invariably pose the same skeptical question. This thing actually flies? Not only did it fly, but it performed unlike anything else in the thin air of the upper altitudes. The monumental Pratt & Whitney R 2800 double Wasp engine, an 18-cylinder radial unit producing 2,000 horsepower, could maintain full power at 27,000 feet, soaring into the stratosphere where conventional German fighters gasped for air. The exhaust gas-fed turbo-supercharger was a technological key, delivering the equivalent of sea-level performance high above the clouds. Major Huber Hub Zemke, commanding the 56 Fighter Group training at Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially held the aircraft in deep contempt. His unit suffered a devastating training period, losing 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in accidents between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47, in its initial iteration, killed more Americans during training than the Germans would in the first months of combat. It torque-rolled dangerously on takeoff, ground-looped on landing, and dove with such enthusiasm that pilots discovered the lethal phenomenon of compressibility, finding their controls frozen as shock waves formed on the wings. Yet, those who survived the learning curve discovered a machine of extraordinary potential. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma who would eventually become one of America's highest-scoring aces with 27 victories, described his first flight succinctly. It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it. The initial combat encounters in April and May 1943 seemed to confirm every German prejudice. The heavy P-47s could not turn with the nimble Focke-Wulf 190s, nor could they match the tight climb rates of the Messerschmitt 109s. The initial operational phase of the P-47 Thunderbolt immediately exposed significant limitations, particularly its cumbersome handling at medium altitudes. Luftwaffe pilots quickly developed precise counter-tactics to exploit these weaknesses, focusing on attacking from below where the heavy Thunderbolt struggled, thus forcing turning engagements where superior agility mattered more than raw firepower. German confidence soared. Hutchman Isef Pips Priller, the commanding officer at Jageschwader 26, famously reported to headquarters after his first encounter that the new American fighter was meat for the slaughter. He derided its performance, claiming it flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. The early statistics seemed to confirm German certainty. In their first month of operations, American fighter groups sustained the loss of 14 Thunderbolts for only 3 confirmed German kills. The RAF, observing from their nimble Spitfire squadrons, quietly suggested that the Americans might be wise to reconsider their choice of mount, with British pilots joking that the most effective evasive maneuver in a P-47 was to unstrap and run around the spacious cockpit. Yet, a crucial, strange reality was unfolding in those early encounters that German intelligence failed to recognize. The P-47s that were successfully shot down had absorbed an incredible degree of punishment before falling. One aircraft returned from a May 4th mission riddled with 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have utterly disintegrated a Messerschmitt or a Spitfire. The massive radial engine, critically lacking vulnerable coolant systems, shrugged off hits that would have instantly stopped any liquid-cooled fighter cold. More significantly, when the P-47s did manage to bring their guns to bear, the results were catastrophic. The Thunderbolt's 8.50 caliber weapons battery created a convergence zone of destruction that German pilots had never before experienced. Unlike the rifle-caliber weapons of early war fighters or cannon, with severely limited ammunition, the American fighter could maintain devastating sustained fire for over 30 seconds, an eternity in the dynamic world of aerial combat. The event that would fundamentally begin changing German perceptions occurred on June 26, 1943, over Lazo, France. It involved 2nd Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron and an encounter that would become legendary on both sides of the conflict. Johnson's formation of 48 P-47s was returning from escort duty when they were violently ambushed by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s from 2/Jageschwader 26, led by Hedman Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, the younger brother of the famous Adolf Galland. The Germans executed a perfect diving attack from the sun, exploiting their overwhelming speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, flying at the rear of the formation, was instantly caught in the crossfire of multiple attackers, sustaining catastrophic damage within the first seconds of the engagement. 20-millimeter cannon shells exploded across his aircraft. The canopy shattered, hydraulic fluid sprayed violently into the cockpit, the engine cowling was partially torn away, and fire erupted behind the instrument panel. Johnson, wounded in the nose and leg by shrapnel and bullet fragments, Johnson was effectively sealed into a tomb of twisted metal. He attempted to bail out, only to find the canopy irrevocably jammed. A 20-millimeter cannon shell had detonated against the track, welding the rail shut. Trapped within the dying airframe at 27,000 feet, what transpired next fundamentally challenged every accepted principle of wartime damage tolerance. Despite the engine violently shaking, the windscreen obscured by streaming oil, and flight controls responding only intermittently, Johnson managed to stabilize the aircraft and orient the crippled P-47 Thunderbolt toward the distant English coast. The Thunderbolt continued its desperate trajectory, carrying damage that would have instantaneously reduced any other contemporary fighter to nothing more than falling wreckage. But the ordeal was far from over. The situation rapidly deteriorated when a lone Focke-Wulf 190, flown by an unidentified pilot attached to two Staffel Jagdgeschwader 26, 2/JG-26, intercepted the wounded American fighter. The Thunderbolt was limping across the channel at less than 170 miles per hour. While historical research has failed to definitively identify the German aggressor, his actions created one of the most astonishing encounters in the annals of aerial combat. Positioning his powerful fighter directly behind Johnson, the German pilot unleashed the full fury of his armament, opening fire with his four 20-millimeter cannon and two 13-millimeter machine guns. Johnson, utterly unable to maneuver or evade, could do little more than huddle behind his armored seatplate and pray for deliverance. The P-47 absorbed the entirety of the Focke-Wulf's cannon ammunition load. Unbelievably, the aircraft remained airborne. The German repositioned and fired again, utilizing only his remaining machine gun rounds. Exhausting his primary firepower, the German pilot pulled alongside the P-47, staring in undisguised disbelief at the flying wreck beside him. Johnson vividly recalled seeing the pilot's young, blond face, his expression morphing rapidly from confident aggression to confusion, and finally, to something closely resembling fear. The German closed in once more, emptying his final machine gun belts into the fuselage. Yet, the Thunderbolt stubbornly flew on. He pulled alongside a final time, offered an informal, bewildered salute, and peeled away, presumably out of ammunition. Johnson finally brought the P-47 down at Manson, the engine failing precisely as the aircraft coasted onto the runway. Post-landing inspection revealed catastrophic damage. The crew chief ceased counting bullet holes after reaching 200. A cannon shell had exploded mere inches from Johnson's head. Another had detonated against the thick armor plate protecting his back. The engine had sustained multiple direct hits. Control cables were partially severed, and three of the four primary longerons, the structural backbone of the fuselage, were shot entirely through. That this aircraft had brought him home sent immediate shock waves through both the American and German air forces. American engineers examining the shattered frame realized they had profoundly underestimated the resilience of their own design. German intelligence, receiving the extraordinary combat reports from 2/JG-26, initially refused to credit the accounts. No aircraft, they insisted, could absorb such punishment, but testimony from multiple pilots confirmed the impossible. The Thunderbolt had absorbed everything the Luftwaffe's best fighter could deliver and survived. By July 1943, American pilots were rapidly mastering the true potential of the P-47 Thunderbolt, a powerful but initially maligned fighter. The secret to unlocking its operational dominance was discovered through the harsh crucible of combat by Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zena, commander of the 56th Fighter Group. His hard-won doctrine was simple yet revolutionary: abandon the traditional low-altitude turning dogfight and rely instead on the aircraft's sheer mass and engine output. The Thunderbolt's enormous weight, initially deemed a fatal flaw, was transformed into its most devastating weapon. Nothing in the Luftwaffe's arsenal could match the speed of a diving P-47. From an altitude of 30,000 feet, The American fighter could accelerate past 550 miles per hour, a velocity unattainable even by German aircraft attempting a vertical descent. This kinetic energy could then be immediately converted into altitude during a zoom climb, leaving any pursuing enemy fighter hopelessly lagging. This crucial method was formalized by Captain Walker Bar Mahiran, who would rapidly ascend to become one of the first American aces in the European theater, developing the now famous boom and zoom tactic, a concept pilots more graphically labeled the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Instead of attempting close-range maneuvers, P-47 formations would soar to 30,000 feet, positioning themselves above the effective operational ceiling of most German interceptors. When Luftwaffe formations appear below, the Thunderbolts would roll inverted and commit to their attack dive, reaching speeds that render precise deflection shooting virtually impossible for defending Germans. At the terminus of these terrifying descents, the combined fire of the heavy American machine guns unleashed a torrent of destruction. German pilots fortunate enough to survive these encounters often describe the incoming attack as facing an absolute wall of lead, the concentrated firepower creating an impenetrable zone of metallic annihilation. Aircraft caught within this devastating convergence pattern did not merely fall. They were witnessed to literally disintegrate in the air. The ultimate, terrifying revelation of American firepower arrived during the pivotal dual raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg on August 17, 1943, the deepest penetration into German heartland attempted up to that date. This monumental mission served as a stark demonstration of both the P-47's inherent limitations, particularly its restricted operational range even when utilizing drop tanks, and its overwhelming effectiveness when tactical doctrines were correctly applied. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, intercepted a large formation of Messerschmitt 110 destroyer aircraft. These twin-engine German fighters, heavily armed with potent cannon and rocket armament, with a specialized Luftwaffe response designed explicitly for bomber killing. Though heavily armed, the Me-110s were significantly less maneuverable than the single-engine P-47. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts immediately rolled into their attack dive, initiating their assault from 28,000 feet. Unfitazir Heinrich Roth, a rear gunner in one of the Me-110s who miraculously survived the engagement, later provided a chilling account during his POW interrogation. He recounted, "The American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. Good hits. I saw them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even wobble." Roth's testimony concluded with the brutal effectiveness of the counterattack. Then he fired. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart. Not shot down, destroyed. Wings separated from the fuselage. The tail severed. The crew compartment shredded into metal confetti. In 2 seconds, a 110 became nothing. 8 Messerschmitt 110s were reduced to wreckage in under 60 seconds. The German pilots had never before encountered such overwhelming and concentrated aerial destruction. The Thunderbolt's defining characteristic was its devastating firepower. Each P-47 carried 8 heavy-caliber machine guns, loaded with 425 rounds per gun, totaling 3,400 rounds and nearly 900 pounds of ammunition weight. At the standard convergence distance, typically set at 300 yards, the ballistic paths of all 8 guns intersected, creating a kill zone approximately 6 feet in diameter. Anything caught within that zone was instantly struck by over 100 projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. This capacity was a direct reflection of American industrial muscle. While the premier German fighters often struggled with limited cannon ammunition, typically only 120 to 200 rounds for a 20mm weapon, American pilots could sustain fire for over half a minute. The standard combat load, mixing armor-piercing incendiary, tracer, and ball ammunition, was engineered to simultaneously shatter and ignite. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who would finish the war as the top American ace in Europe with 28 victories, described the overwhelming effect. "When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw a 109 literally cut in half, the tail falling one way, the nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what hit him." By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was confronted with an even more horrifying reality regarding the P-47. P-47. Its performance improved dramatically with altitude, precisely where German fighters began to falter. The Thunderbolt's powerful R-2800 double Wasp engine, equipped with turbo supercharger, maintained its rated power output up to 30,000 feet. In stark contrast, German fighters, relying on less efficient single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers, suffered significant performance degradation above 25,000 feet. This critical disparity proved fatal for Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, on October 8, 1943. Leading Jageschwader eyeing against AB-17 formation high over Bremen at 28,000 feet, Philipp found his Focke-Wulf 190A 6 sluggish and unresponsive in thin air. The powerful BMW 801 engine, dominant at medium altitudes, was now gasping for oxygen nearly 6 miles above the Earth. When P-47s of the 56 Fighter Group dove upon its formation from a commanding height of 32,000 feet, the German fighters were rendered helpless targets. Robert Johnson, an experienced combat pilot rapidly ascending to ace status, was flying at 31,000 feet when he spotted Philipp's distinctive Focke-Wulf, marked by elaborate nose art. Johnson's subsequent combat report was chillingly clinical. Open fire at 300 yards, 30-degree deflection. Observed strikes along entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded. No parachute observed. Philipp's death sent immediate shockwaves through the Luftwaffe command. If one of their greatest survivors, a man who had flown over 500 combat missions on both the Eastern and Western fronts, could not withstand a Thunderbolt, the fate of average pilots was sealed. The German High Command ordered an immediate investigation into the P-47's capabilities, culminating in a sobering report delivered to Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring in November 1943. Operating at 42,000 feet, an altitude unreachable by contemporary German interceptors, the P-47 Thunderbolt was defined by its sheer survivability. Its dive speed approached the sound barrier, and it was protected by exceptional armor. A 3/8-inch steel plate shielding the pilot's back, a half-an-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armor deflection plates around the engine. Crucially, the Thunderbolt's legendary ruggedness allowed it to absorb catastrophic damage, sufficient to destroy 3 conventional fighters, and still reliably return its pilot home. The definitive transformation from perceived laughingstock to a deadly aerial menace was finalized in January 1944 with the arrival of a new variant in England, the P-47D-22. This model incorporated the Hamilton Standard hydromatic propeller, featuring massive 13-foot diameter paddle blades. These broad chord blades bend to thin air like colossal oars, resulting in an immediate and dramatic improvement in climb rate. Where earlier Thunderbolts had previously achieved an anemic 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, the new paddle blade variants could now surge upward at 3,000 feet per minute, a performance profile that matched or exceeded German fighters across most operational altitudes. This massive propeller also fundamentally improved acceleration, enabling P-47s to build kinetic energy faster during level flight. The shock of the sudden capability shift was acutely felt by the veteran German pilots. Headman Heinz Knoker of Jageschwader 11, a seasoned aviator with over 200 combat missions, encountered these new variants during a bomber interception near Hanover in February 1944. His combat diary recorded the chilling realization, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb." He continued, "We bounced a formation near Hanover, expecting our usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. When we tried to disengage, they followed us up to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." Beyond the enhanced performance, the paddle blade propeller redefined the aircraft's acoustic signature. The distinctive thundering roar, created by the blade tips reaching near supersonic speeds, could be heard miles away, a deep, threatening rumble that signaled death from above. German ground troops quickly learned to identify approaching P-47s by sound alone, dubbing the machine Donnerschlag, the thunderclap. By March 1944, the introduction of external fuel tanks, typically 2 108-gallon wing tanks or a 75-gallon belly tank, extended the Thunderbolt's operational radius to over 1,000 miles. Crucially, The improved performance provided by the paddle blade allowed Thunderbolts to fight effectively on equal terms immediately after jettisoning their tanks. The Luftwaffe's desperate response was to concentrate solely on the bomber formations, hoping to shatter the American daylight campaign. This strategy, however, required flying directly to the P-47 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal proposition. German pilots, including Major G.A. Rahl, one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, developed a grudging respect that bordered on outright fear for the powerful American fighter. The raw survivability of the Thunderbolt was demonstrated when Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer, a seasoned pilot, survived a harrowing encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944, an engagement that left him severely wounded. His later recollections painted a vivid picture of the sheer shock delivered by the American heavy fighter. We saw them above us, fat silhouettes against the sun. Someone laughed and said, "Here come the flying pigs." Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. He described the attack as an overwhelming force. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The first pass destroyed 3 of our fighters, just gone, transformed into burning debris. Their guns in fire in bursts like ours. They poured out solid streams of fire. Getting caught in that stream meant instant death. Beyond their devastating firepower, the escort missions revealed a fundamental P-47 advantage: endurance. While German fighters were forced to operate at maximum power settings, rapidly consuming precious fuel, the massive American radial engines permitted highly efficient cruising at high altitude. This efficiency allowed Thunderbolts to remain with the bomber's streams for hours, constantly rotating top cover, while retaining sufficient fuel reserves for combat and the long return journey. As the newer, longer-range P-51 Mustangs began arriving in numbers to assume primary long-range escort duties in the spring of 1944, P-47 units began shifting their focus. This transition towards specialized ground attack began in earnest in April 1944, as the Allies finalized preparations for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's inherent robust construction and heavy machine gun battery proved equally effective against targets on the ground. Standard armor-piercing incendiary ammunition was capable of penetrating the relatively thin top armor of most German vehicles, while the sheer volume of fire could obliterate soft targets in moments. A mere 2-second burst delivered 160 half-inch projectiles into a target area roughly the size of a truck. Yet it was the addition of external ordnance, bombs, and rockets that truly transformed the P-47 into a devastating multi-role platform. The D-25 variant could carry 2 1,000-pound bombs under the wings and a 500-pounder under the fuselage, a bomb load comparable to early war medium bombers. Later models incorporated zero-length rocket stubs, allowing the carriage of 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, VARs, each delivering the destructive power equivalent to a 105 mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the desperate Normandy campaign, experienced the unparalleled terror of these attacks firsthand. He recalled the visceral psychological and physical impact. They came in low, so low you could see the pilots' faces. The sound was terrifying. Engines roaring, rockets screaming. Then the hammer of those heavy machine guns. He recounted the destruction. A column of our trucks simply ceased to exist. 20 vehicles transformed into burning wreckage in one pass. The psychological effect on the men was devastating. They labeled them J-bows or fighter bombers, but von Luck recognized their unique lethality. These were something beyond that. They were flying artillery with the accuracy of snipers. On June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe discovered exactly how completely the balance of air power had shifted. Over 500 P-47 provided an impenetrable aerial umbrella for the invasion forces, creating total air superiority over the landing beaches. German fighters attempting to penetrate this shield and reach the landing zones were systematically massacred. The testimony of German pilot Jagdgeschwader, one of only 3 Luftwaffe aviators to reach the Normandy beaches on D-Day, painted a stark picture of Allied air superiority, reporting chillingly that the sky belonged to the Americans. The sheer scale of the 9th Air Force's presence was overwhelming. Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. His group's attempt to penetrate this aerial fortress at dawn was suicidal. 12 fighters from our group went in. I was the only one to return. The P-47s were omnipresent, forming an impenetrable barrier. You couldn't climb over them, couldn't dive under them. Their heavy guns turned our fighters into aluminum rain. In the critical weeks following the invasion, the P-47 systematically demolished the Wehrmacht ability to maneuver in daylight. The statistics compiled by the 9th Air Force were staggering proof of this air-ground synergy. In June alone, Thunderbolts claimed the destruction of 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armor vehicles, and 4,553 essential horse-drawn vehicles. This relentless ground attack forced the German military to move exclusively under the cover of darkness, severely crippling their capacity to respond effectively to the advancing Allied armies. The Germans attempted every possible countermeasure, reinforcing vehicle armor, deploying dense concentrations of anti-aircraft guns, and developing sophisticated new camouflage techniques, but nothing proved effective against the Thunderbolt threat. The P-47's unique combination of high speed, rugged armor, and devastating firepower rendered it nearly unstoppable. Even the feared 88mm flak guns, deadly against high-altitude bombers, struggled to accurately track the fast-moving fighters attacking at low altitude. While fundamentally reshaping the war in Europe, the P-47 simultaneously proved its essential worth in the Pacific theater. Operating from the humid airfields of New Guinea, the 348 Fighter Group discovered that the Thunderbolt's durability and range were perfectly suited to the vast distances and harsh combat conditions of the Pacific War. Colonel Neil Kirby, commanding the 348th, pioneered new tactics tailored for the theater. His heroism was cemented on October 11, 1943, when Kirby personally led just 4 P-47s against a formation of 40 Japanese aircraft over Wewak. In a single audacious mission, he shot down 6 enemy planes, an act that earned him the Medal of Honor. The Japanese, accustomed to engaging nimble but fragile American fighters, were utterly unprepared for the P-47's resilience and heavy armament. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, having encountered these machines over New Guinea, later recorded his astonishment. We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannon, which could destroy a P-40 with a few hits, seemed to have no effect. I put dozens of rounds into one Thunderbolt and watched it fly away. He noted the psychological impact of their return fire. Their return fire was terrifying. Streams of heavy bullets that tore aircraft apart. This operational demand for extended reach led to the development of the definitive Pacific variant, the P-47N, specifically designed for ultra-long-range escort. The N model featured innovative wet wings, each holding an additional 93 gallons of fuel, extending its operational range to an astonishing 2,350 miles. This evolution allowed the P-47N to escort B-29 superfortresses all the way to the Japanese home islands, transforming the short-legged fighter of 1943 into a true long-range weapon. Perhaps the ultimate vindication of the Thunderbolt's robust design and continuous evolution came in its later encounters with the pinnacle of German aerospace engineering, the Messerschmitt Me 262 jet fighter. The introduction of the Messerschmitt Me 262 signaled a terrifying technological imbalance, but American Thunderbolt pilots quickly identified critical weaknesses in the jet's envelope. Though the P-47 was decidedly slower in level flight, the jets were fatally vulnerable during the low-speed regimes of takeoff and landing, and critically, during high-speed dives from extreme altitude. This latter tactic proved devastatingly effective on November 27, 1944. Lieutenant Colonel John C. Mears of the 352nd Fighter Group achieved one of the first confirmed kills of a Me-262 using a P-47. Plummeting from 28,000 feet, Mears pushes Thunderbolt to speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, fast enough to momentarily negate the jet's speed advantage. The unsuspecting German pilot, confident in his superior velocity, never registered the diving threat until Mears's 8.50 caliber machine guns erupted at a range of 400 yards. Mears's subsequent combat report documented the horrifying efficacy of the concentrated fire. The enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large pieces, including both engines, separated from the fuselage. The pilot did not escape. This confirmed that the sheer, focused firepower of the P-47 proved far more effective against the new jet airframes than initially anticipated. The necessity of countering the German jet threat spurred immediate technological adaptation. By early 1945, specialized P-47M variants were deployed, engineered specifically to intercept the Me-262 and the V-1 flying bombs. Equipped with water methanol injection, which boosted engine power to an astonishing 2,800 horsepower and featuring refined aerodynamics, these ultimate Thunderbolts could achieve 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, making them viable interceptors under specific tactical conditions. Major George Boswick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron, equipped with these specialized P-47s, exemplified this new doctrine, shooting down two Me-262s in March 1945. His tactical assessment prioritized mass firepower over raw speed. The jets are faster, but they can't turn and they can't take punishment. One good burst from our battery, and they come apart like they're made of paper. Boswick understood that the jet pilots were forced to slow down to engage Allied bomber formations, creating the lethal opportunity the P-47 pilots exploited. The ultimate and bloody demonstration of American industrial capacity versus the dwindling resources of the Third Reich arrived during Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe's desperate, high-stakes attempt on January 1, 1945, to shatter Allied air dominance. Nearly 900 German fighters, crewed by their best remaining aviators, launched coordinated surprise attacks against forward Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At Y 34 Airfield near Metz, home to the P-47s of the 365th Fighter Group, the initial assault achieved devastating success, destroying 22 Thunderbolts and several other support aircraft on the ground. A captured German pilot, brought to the command post amidst the burning wreckage, pointed scornfully at the destruction and taunted, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking's legendary reply immediately resonated throughout the 9th Air Force. Gesturing toward the flight line, where ground crews were already clearing debris and preparing hard stands for incoming shipments, Brooking delivered a decisive counterpoint. "By tomorrow, we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German pilot's smirk vanished instantly. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47D-40S, flown directly from English depots, filled the cleared flight line. Operation Bodenplatte cost the Luftwaffe 271 aircraft and 213 irreplaceable pilots, a catastrophic loss that permanently sealed the fate of German air operations. The losses sustained by the German Luftwaffe were not merely material. They represented the irreplaceable drain of veteran instructors and seasoned squadron leaders. Their defeat was fundamentally rooted in the inability to replenish quality manpower, a stark contrast to the overwhelming industrial capacity of the United States. While the Americans lost 134 aircraft across all attacked airfields, these machines were replaced within a single week. The sheer scale of American production told the true story of inevitable defeat. The P-47 Thunderbolt became the physical manifestation of this industrial dominance. Republic Aviation ultimately produced 15,683 P-47s during the war, making it the most manufactured American fighter of the conflict. At its zenith, the massive Farmingdale factory on Long Island completed one Thunderbolt every hour around the clock. Complementing this output was the Evansville plant in Indiana, built rapidly from empty farmland starting in 1942, which escalated production to 500 aircraft per month by 1944. The complexity of these machines was astonishing. Each P-47D required 65,000 individual parts, incorporated 8 miles of electrical wiring, demanded 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and utilized 300 pounds of rubber. The powerful engine alone contained 2,400 individual components, all machined to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Yet, it was the American workforce, many of them women who had never encountered an aircraft prior to Pearl Harbor, that assembled these intricate systems with a precision that frequently exceeded typical peacetime standards. The demand for ammunition was equally staggering. Every single P-47 sortie required 3,400 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, and with hundreds of Thunderbolts flying daily missions, consumption exceeded 10 million rounds per month by mid-1944. Arsenals like the Lake City facility in Missouri, just one node in production network, delivered 30 million rounds monthly. Each cartridge was manufactured to tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch, guaranteeing reliable feeding through the synchronized gun mechanisms under the stress of combat. This mechanical armada required vast resources to operate. Fuel consumption was enormous. A Thunderbolt burned 100 gallons per hour in normal flight, spiking to 300 gallons when combat power and water injection were engaged. The 9th Air Force alone consumed over 25 million gallons of high-octane aviation fuel monthly by late 1944. All of this material was shipped across the Atlantic in tankers that were themselves products of the American system of mass production. Even more critical than the sheer volume of aircraft was the quality and quantity of American pilot training. By 1944, the United States was graduating 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training schools, a number greater than Germany had managed to train throughout the entire war. Each P-47 pilot received a minimum of 400 hours of flight instruction before entering combat, including 100 hours dedicated specifically to advanced fighters. By painful contrast, German pilots were often pushed into battle with less than 100 total flight hours by the war's conclusion. The superior quality of the American training regime was evident in the skies over Europe. U.S. pilots arrived fully proficient in complex formation flying, instrument navigation, gunnery, and tactical maneuvering. They had practiced against captured German aircraft, giving them an intimate understanding of their enemy's capabilities and limitations. Furthermore, they knew their own aircraft systems intimately, having studied technical manuals that German pilots rarely, if ever, received. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, arriving in England in September 1944, perfectly exemplified this decisive American training advantage. American pilots arrived in the theater with overwhelming preparation. Logbooks detailing 420 hours of total flight time, including 75 intensive hours dedicated to the P-47 Thunderbolt, underscored an operational readiness unmatched by their adversaries. Having mastered deflection shooting against towed targets and meticulously studied gun camera film from actual combat missions, the rookie American pilot often entered his first engagement with a confidence born of simulation and material support. The resulting air combat, from the American perspective, was rarely a contest of equals. My first mission, I knew exactly what to do. The German pilot I faced couldn't have had half my experience. It wasn't even a fair fight. This stark reality was confirmed by the enemy in March 1945. Oberstleutnant Isef Priller, the same veteran ace who 2 years prior had derisively dismissed the P-47s as pregnant cows, was interviewed by German propaganda officials attempting to salvage wartime morale. His subsequent statement, however, proved too profoundly demoralizing for publication, revealing the complete transformation of the Luftwaffe's attitude. Priller declared the Thunderbolt the best fighter-bomber ever built, citing its unprecedented operational reliability. Its firepower is unprecedented. Weapons that never jam, never overheat, never run out of ammunition in normal combat. The P-47, he noted, served simultaneously as a medium bomber carrying heavy ordnance, an artillery platform firing rockets, and a capable fighter when needed. Yet, the machine itself was merely a symptom of a deeper, more fatal reality: unlimited American production. They lose 10, they build 20, Priller lamented. We lose one, it is gone forever. Their pilots arrive better trained than our instructors. They have fuel for training, ammunition for practice, spare parts for everything. We have nothing but courage, and courage without resources is just delayed defeat. The contemptuous laughter of 1943 had faded into a chilling dread. The sound of the Thunderbolt's guns now signaled the arrival of inevitable defeat, a mechanical, precise, and unstoppable force. The conflict was decided not by superior tactics or braver pilots, but by an avalanche of overwhelming material superiority. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe existed largely as a bureaucratic entity. Fuel shortages had grounded the remaining aircraft, Experienced pilots were decimated or captured, and airfields were reduced to cratered ruins. Even when aircraft could take to the skies, German pilots faced an impossible equation: attacking meant confronting P-47 formations that commanded every altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet. The futility of resistance was encapsulated by Feldwebel Klaus Brechner, one of the last pilots trained in 1945, who flew a single combat mission before the armistice. His encounter with Thunderbolts over Leipzig lasted 12 seconds. "I saw them diving from above, for Thunderbolts in perfect formation," Brechner recalled. "I tried to turn, but they were too fast. The leader fired from 500 meters. My aircraft shook like it was hit by sledgehammers. The engine exploded, the wings separated, and Brechner barely escaped. From his parachute, he witnessed the destruction of his entire staff. 6 fighters obliterated in under a minute. The sky rained burning aluminum and bodies. The psychological impact was total. German medical officers began diagnosing what they termed Jabo fever, a manifest physical stress response triggered solely by the reporting of Thunderbolts in the area. Veterans who had faced the fury of Spitfires and Hurricanes without flinching became paralyzed. The sheer destructive power of the Thunderbolt induced a profound psychological effect. German pilots often reported being physically ill before missions against P-47s, and the distinctive, approaching thunder their engines caused immediate panic among ground troops, who understood that survival hinged upon instant cover. The final statistics of P-47 operations stand as a stark testament to its unmatched efficacy and capacity for destruction. Across the European theater, the Thunderbolt accounted for 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, and a further 3,315 aircraft annihilated on the ground. Its role as a tactical ground attack platform was devastating, crippling German logistics through the destruction of 86,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored fighting vehicles, 68,000 trucks, and 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles. In the Pacific, the impact was similarly crippling. 697 Japanese aircraft destroyed in the air, 150 on the ground, 1,500 vehicles, 150 locomotives, and countless barges, ships, and installations were eliminated. The 9th Air Force alone, predominantly equipped with P-47s, executed 213,873 combat sorties, dropping 120,000 tons of bombs, firing 135 million rounds of ammunition, and launching 60,000 rockets. The Thunderbolt units achieved a formidable 4.6 to 1 kill ratio in aerial combat, while simultaneously maintaining the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter bomber. Yet, behind these staggering figures lay the irreplaceable human cost. The Luftwaffe suffered the loss of approximately 28,000 pilots killed in combat against Western Allied forces, many falling to the concentrated fire of American heavy machine guns. Each loss represented years of specialized training that Germany could never replenish. By the conflict's end, the average German fighter pilot possessed less than 30 hours of combat experience, a stark contrast to the P-47 pilot's average of over 200 hours. This overwhelming reality was documented by the enemy itself. At the Luftwaffe Interrogation Center at Ober-Ursel, captured Allied pilots were debriefed, and the record seized in 1945 reveal a complete and continuous reversal of German intelligence assessment regarding the P-47. The official file, updated throughout the war, tracked the growing threat. April 1943 ***, large, unmaneuverable fighter, inferior to German types in all performance parameters except dive speed, machine gun armament insufficient against cannon-armed fighters. Assessment, minimal threat. December 1943 ***, exceptional high altitude performance, extreme structural strength, firepower increasingly problematic, pilots showing improved tactics. Assessment, significant threat above 25,000 feet, June 1944 ***, dominant fighter bomber, superior to all German types above 20,000 feet firepower, devastating against all target types. Structural strength makes shoot-down extremely difficult. Assessment, critical threat at all altitudes. March 1945 ***, best fighter bomber of the war. Combination of firepower, durability, and performance unmatched. Pilot quality exceptional. Assessment: unsurvivable in direct engagement. Asterisk decades later, in 1985, at a reunion of German and American fighter pilots held in Phoenix. Years after the conflict, a curious and profound reconciliation took place in Arizona, where former adversaries gathered in reflection. Among them was General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, the former General der Jagdflieger, the operational commander of the Luftwaffe fighter arm. When questioned about the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, his video-recorded reply captured the complete and devastating transformation of aerial warfare doctrine. Galland admitted, without reservation, that we made a terrible mistake in 1943. Initially, the Luftwaffe dismissed the P-47. They beheld this massive, heavy fighter and scoffed, believing the Americans fundamentally misunderstood the tenets of air combat. We said they built a bomber and called a fighter. Galland recalled, we were the ones who didn't understand. The genius of the P-47 lay precisely in its rejection of the sleek, high-performance European paradigm. The Americans had not attempted to replicate a Messerschmitt or a Spitfire. They engineered a uniquely American weapon centered on mass production, overwhelming firepower, and, above all, survivability. In the brutal calculus of a war of attrition, they correctly identified that the aircraft capable of absorbing immense punishment while delivering devastating offensive power would ultimately dictate the outcome. Galland's true understanding crystallized only after the war, when he flew a captured Thunderbolt. The sheer power was staggering. It climbed like it was falling upward, he noted. The cockpit was comfortable, visibility was excellent, and the controls proved remarkably precise. A pilot's aircraft enveloped in armor. Yet, the profound realization was industrial. The United States manufactured over 15,000 of these complex machines while simultaneously prosecuting a global two-ocean war. Each required an engine vastly more sophisticated than anything produced by the German war machine. Yet they built them faster than we could construct simple fighters, Galland concluded. That's when I knew we never had a chance. The P-47's armament was legendary. Those 8.50 caliber guns, responsible for the terrifying rhythmic din that earned them the moniker Roosevelt's piano, were the sound of defeat for many German pilots. Galland confirmed, once you heard that sound, you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. The P-47 did not merely defeat the Luftwaffe. It systematically destroyed its capacity to fight. This destruction was rooted in an industrial philosophy of brute force engineering backed by seemingly inexhaustible resources. Every component was intentionally overbuilt, overpowered, and over-engineered. The structural integrity was astonishing. The wing spars were designed to support 40,000 pounds, 3 times the aircraft's maximum loaded weight. The engine mount was rated to withstand a punishing 12 G-force. Critical control cables were doubled throughout, often incorporating automatic backup systems. The ammunition feed system itself was a marvel of complexity and reliability. 8 separate ammunition boxes, each holding 425 rounds, fed through electric boost motors specifically designed to prevent jamming during high-G maneuvers. The guns were electrically heated to ensure flawless operation at altitude, each equipped with an individual charging mechanism and synchronization capability. Pilots could fine-tune the convergence, adjusting the striking pattern from 150 to 400 yards to optimize for the preferred engagement range. Even in the post-war era, some German veterans clung to the notion that the P-47 won solely through quantity, arguing that German fighters were technically superior but overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The official combat records emphatically refute this claim. In engagements where the opposing forces were numerically equal, P-47s consistently prevailed. The heavy machine gun armament, often dismissed by European designers as inferior to high-explosive cannon, proved decisively more effective in the relentless reality of air-to-air combat. Analysis of captured gun camera footage provided a definitive explanation for the Thunderbolt's overwhelming lethality. While individually more destructive, high-caliber cannon shells demanded precise aim and carried severely limited ammunition, typically ranging from 120 to 200 rounds in total. In sharp contrast, the P-47's massive battery, of 8 synchronized .50 caliber weapons created a devastating probability cloud of lead. This sheer volume of fire guaranteed multiple hits, even with imperfect deflection aiming. At standard engagement ranges, a quick 2-second burst ensured that at least 20 rounds impacted a fighter-sized target, securing its rapid destruction. Crucially, the ammunition itself was technologically superior. The American .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds employed a delayed-action fuse, ensuring deep penetration into the enemy aircraft structure before detonation. The incendiary compound within these projectiles burned at an astonishing 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, heat sufficient to instantly ignite the aluminum structure of any contemporary fighter. German 20mm shells, though heavier, frequently detonated upon surface contact, resulting in damage that appeared spectacular but often remained frustratingly superficial. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt remains the heaviest single-engine piston fighter ever mass-produced, a fact underscoring its immense resilience. Its empty weight of 10,000 pounds exceeded the maximum gross weight of some twin-engine contemporaries. Its massive engine produced more raw power than entire bomber formations of the previous war. Its collective weapons delivered more concentrated firepower than a frontline squad of infantry. Yet, this instrument of annihilation was constructed by the thousands, flown into battle by young men barely out of high school, and maintained under grueling combat conditions by mechanics whose specialized training spanned mere weeks. The profound transformation of German combat opinion, from initial mockery to abject terror, required less than 2 years. In that brief window, the flying milk bottle, as it was initially dubbed, became arguably the most feared aircraft in the Luftwaffe's experience. Veterans who had unflinchingly faced the Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks spoke of encounters with the P-47 only in hushed tones, decades after the conflict had ended. Today, at the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a meticulously restored P-47D stands among aviation legends. Its official placard details specifications and battle honors, but the true narrative is encapsulated in a small display case. It holds spent .50 caliber shells and a strip of gun camera film documenting a Focke-Wulf 190 disintegrating under a torrent of fire. Beneath this display is a chilling quote, taken from a 1945 interrogation report of an unnamed German pilot. "We laughed when we first saw them. Fat, ugly American fighters that couldn't turn, couldn't climb, couldn't fight. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb. They just pointed those guns at you, and you ceased to exist. The laughter died with our comrades." The P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat as an object of derision in April 1943 and concluded the war as the ultimate instrument of aerial annihilation. In that span, its 8 synchronized Browning machine guns irrevocably rewrote the rules of aerial warfare, burying the decimated Luftwaffe under an avalanche of lead. By May 1945, the thunder had spoken, and the skies belonged definitively to the Allied forces.